everyone, welcome back. In this video I'll show you how to make a castellated bezel strip using the Bezel Ease tool. This is the second video in my tips, tricks, and tools series, but I also plan to make a series of start to finish step-by-step video tutorials for making a bezel set cabochon pendant. This is the cabochon I'll be using to make the pendant. The cab was cut from a slab of high-grade fossilized dinosaur bone that I purchased from a little rock shop in Smithville, Texas. I really love the contrast of the white cells against the black webbing in the stone, so it should make a great looking pendant. The first thing we want to do is measure the circumference of the cabochon. I just use a strip of painter's tape to wrap it around the edge of the stone, and then mark it with a Sharpie, but you can use any method you prefer. It's not critical to get an exact measurement, but make sure it's fairly accurate. Next, we'll use a pair of calipers to measure the bezel edge at its highest point. You can also use a compass to do this, but I recommend adding a nice set of digital calipers to your tool set. Lock the caliper jaws in place once you've measured the bezel edge. For most of the bezel strips that I make, I use a sheet of 22 gauge sterling silver, but you can use .999 pure silver if you'd like. Using the calipers, I'll scribe a line along the flat side of the sheet, and then I'll mark the back as well. Next, we're going to cut along the scribed line using a jeweler saw. It takes some practice and patience to cut a long, straight line, so you may want to practice on some copper sheet before attempting this on sterling. For the next steps, I've switched over to the GRS clamping system, but you can use a regular bench clamp to hold the piece in place. Using a steel file, we'll need to file the cut edge flat. This can be a bit tedious, but it's important to make sure that the cut edge is flat and parallel to the factory edge of the bezel strip. It doesn't have to be perfect, but try to get it as close as you can. Next, you'll want to deburr the filed edge using a flat pen file. Once the edge is nice and smooth, we're ready to clamp it into the Bezel Ease to cut the notches. The Bezel Ease jig is a stainless steel clamp that comes with 2 Allen head set screws and 2 spacers. We won't need the spacers for this step, so we'll set them aside for now. Now it's time to clamp the bezel strip into the Bezel Ease. Start by loosening the set screws and placing the bezel strip in between the 2 sides of the Bezel Ease jig. The jig notches are different sizes on each side, so be sure to use the correct size for your piece. Carefully line up the notches and adjust the bezel strip until the edge of the strip is flush with the top of the Bezel Ease jig. Once everything is lined up, finger tighten the set screws and check again to make sure that the 2 sides of the jig remain aligned. Once the bezel strip is secured in the Bezel Ease jig, place the jig in the bench clamp and finger tighten to hold it in place. Now it's time to cut the notches in the bezel strip. I typically use a number 4 saw blade for castellated bezels, but you can go a size higher or lower on 22 gauge Sterling sheet. When cutting the notches, be careful not to cut into the jig. You only need a few pulls of the saw blade to reach the proper depth of the cut. To complete the look of the castellated bezel, we're going to lay the bezel strip on its side and cut grooves that line up with the notches in the top of the bezel strip. For this step, we need to use the spacers. Position the spacers so that the spacer edge sits just under the notches in the jig clamp. Lay the bezel strip flat against the spacers and line up the notches in the bezel strip with the notches in the Bezel Ease tool. Finger tighten the set screws and check the alignment again. Now you're ready to cut the grooves. Be very careful when cutting the grooves. You only want to cut partway into the metal. Only 2 or 3 pulls of the saw blade is needed, and it's very easy to cut all the way through the bezel strip, so take it slow at first until you get a feel for it. After cutting the grooves, remove the bezel strip from the clamp and use 800 grit sandpaper to clean it up. It should end up looking something like this. I hope you enjoyed watching this video as much as I did making it. Be sure to like and subscribe to my channel for more jewelry making tutorials and future installments to the Tips, Tricks, and Tools series. Thanks for watching.